And we see that on a personal level. We see that on a organizational level. Anytime an organization fails to master one specific part of their business, they typically, I guess in summary, be like, my gut produces a hypothesis. The data tell me what to do after that. And if it's not extremely clear, then I go back to just that gut feeling. But it's not really gut. It's a gut feeling is,
Hey, welcome to the Beyond the Business podcast, where we dive behind the brands of people on the internet. Today we have Mark American Smith here on the call. He has a sales background experience in Ukraine as well as experience in different industries when it comes to manager, as well as sales and internet personnel when it comes to LinkedIn. So we're just going to dive right into things, going over the winner mindset, entrepreneurial spirit, as well as his background. Mark American Smith. Welcome to the call. How's your day going today?
It's a good day. How about you?
Good day. I've been good.
Good.
Diving into everything from the very beginning. Obviously, maybe some people come from your LinkedIn, maybe some people don't know you. And coming from my stage. Explain yourself. Who's Mark American Smith?
Oh, I'm just a normal guy that has a big online presence. Usually white people know who I am. Spent 20 years in sales and business leadership. And now I consult on growth strategies with all manner of businesses, any type of size. So clients that do $1 billion in revenue and clients that do, $1 million in revenue. I basically utilize my systems to help any of them grow and help to build good culture and visibility and help them achieve their goals without a lot of waste.
You said you're a big guy online, right? And that's why people mainly know you?
Yeah, probably. I mean, I don't know how else they would know me.
For sure. I was just wondering, before we even start the short question, obviously you probably didn't expect that to happen, right? Or just
No. It wasn't on purpose. Didn't expect it.
No worries. So our first section of the podcast is short answer questions.
Okay.
So we've got 23 AI generated questions. We've had guests. So just choose 3 numbers and we'll go through the questions.
Choose 3 numbers?
Yeah.
What does that mean?
1 through 23. Choose 3 numbers, and those will be the short questions for you.
2, 5, 13.
2, 5, 13. Okay. So first off, right off the bat, what inspired you to start your sales journey?
Well, I was going to be an attorney and followed my father's footsteps and take over his firm. And then he visited me in college and asked me how much I like college. And I said, it's great. And he said, what do you like? And I said, I like playing baseball and hanging out with friends. And he said, do you like term papers? And I said, nope. And he said, well, that's what being a lawyer is. So sales it was.
I see. And when you got into that space of trying to be an attorney, did you know about the term paper thing?
Not really. I mean, growing up, I'd go to court with my dad and watch him, in trial, which was really exciting. But when he said that, of course, I realized that looking back, whenever I would visit him in his office, which was a lot, I probably visited him 2 or 3 times a week. In my childhood, it was pretty much nothing but desk work and getting prepared for trial. And I definitely knew that wasn't something that I was going to be, highly motivated to do. So once he just sort of reminded me what 95% of being an attorney is, then it made perfect sense for me to not go into law and just to do something else.
I love that. Question 5 is, can you tell me about a significant turning point or moment of clarity in your career?
Sure. I can talk about kind of the earliest one, and that would be, when I got finished with BYU, I got a very coveted job as a pharmaceutical sales rep. And at least back then, I don't know whether it's still coveted now, but back then you would have thousands of applications for a single role. And somehow I got the job. And so I was really excited because, you get a company car and you supposedly go on a lot of trips, play a lot of golf, and your job is to just, wine and dine doctors. But I hated it from the second I started. I hated my first day, and I hated every day in the next 2.5 or 3 years. But it was a tough thing to hate because, if I don't like the cushiest sales job in America, then,
Mhm.
what am I going to like? And I finally got the courage to leave that company and, uh, and then got into a different sales role, which was over the phone. It was inside sales. And after, 6 weeks, 8 weeks of it being kind of rocky, once I hit my stride, I realized that that was going to be a great career path for me. And so my career pretty quickly went into sales leadership um, and then business, leadership in terms of running operations, marketing, you name it. And so I think one of the biggest inflection points was um, trying a second type of sales without giving up on sales. And I lecture to a lot of sales programs and MBA programs and whatnot. One of the things I remind them is just because you don't like your first sales role doesn't mean that sales isn't for you. And there's so many different types of sales roles that you should try out several before you find the one that you really love.
Mhm.
And that's what worked for me. I mean, if I hadn't done that, I don't know what else I would have done for a living. Um, and I was just glad that I stuck it out to try a different type of sales, and my career kind of took off after that.
Love that. Love that. And then question 13, what advice would you give to someone starting out in your field?
Probably just what I said right there, which is, if you want to be in sales, first of all, understand that no two sales roles are the same. There's so many different industries. You can be doing it over the phone. You can be doing it face to face. You could be a dealer. You could be a retailer. You could be a wholesaler. You can be in 100 different industries. You can be a setter. You can be a closer. Low ticket, high ticket. There's so many different choices that you have. That what's really important is you try out a few things and determine the type of sales role that meets what your personality enjoys. And one thing I talk a lot about is what's called like um, the win ratio or the win velocity. So a great lesson I had when I was looking for another sales job after the pharmaceutical world was
Mhm.
I called my brother and I said, I've just been offered this job selling high end corporate packages to the Indy 500 and the Masters tournament. And he said, that sounds amazing. And he said, how many sales will you make in a year in order to make a good living? I said, I only have to make 2 or 3 sales. And he said, that's awesome. That sounds like a great job, but are you the kind of person that can only hear a yes a couple times a year and still be happy and motivated? And I realized, no, I couldn't. And so, again, that was just another point where I had to figure out what worked for me. And so I've always stayed in a relatively fast paced environment. Some call it transactional, but I've sold things that cost, $1 million. Um, and I've sold things that, or led sales of things that cost $50. The main thing is just, at what pace do you want to win? And, and for me, doing something uh, more transactional with
Mhm.
where you're selling lots of things over the course of a month just fit really nicely. And um, the same goes for somebody who they've been in like an enterprise role or a gov tech or something where they might only make 1 or 2 sales a year. Sometimes they leave that because they think that they want something that is more fast paced. But I usually question them and really figure out whether that is what they want to do. And if they do, that's great. If not, then I usually tell them that they should probably explore different opportunities within the type of work that they already do, because their issue isn't necessarily that they're only making a few enterprise sales a year. It may just be that they don't like the product they're selling or the service they're selling or who they're selling into. I have friends that are the world's greatest enterprise salespeople, and
Mhm.
they would go insane going into like a mid market role because it isn't as complex and they thrive off the complexity, and vice versa. I've got people that are the world's greatest inside sales, mid market, doing tons of transactions, and they would be absolutely miserable if they got into something that only, you only close 2 or 3 transactions a year. So much of it is just about finding the right fit. And as a young person, it's very hard to do that without trying things out, or at least exposing yourself to different opportunities through your network and shadowing people and asking tons of questions. And that really can make the difference between your career going well or going very poorly. Um, the other thing is just, in the sales world, there are some people that think that the linear progression is sales to sales leadership, and they find themselves very unhappy in a sales leadership role. And they find out later that really the progression they should have gone for is, bigger ticket items, or they should have, looked for a different way to progress in their career. So, there's no one size fits all. And I typically find that those who struggle are just mismatched to the thing that they should be selling, or the organization for whom they should be selling. And by finding the right matchup, it cures most things.
I love that. I love that. And I think that dives into our conversation about like life design. And you talk about, hey, like designing your life. And I found, at least in my life, I'm pretty young. I've had small pivots that made a big difference as well. Like I was doing pest control, and I was like, the people are successful in pest control, but it just wasn't for me. I wasn't loving it at all. And then I went to canvassing roofing, and all I had to do was schedule appointments. And that was like a video game for me. So I was like,
Yeah.
oh, I'm already making hourly pay, and then bonus for scheduling. So then it just was a lot better for me.
Yeah. So you enjoyed the roofing more.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A lot of people around me were like, why do you go from sales to sales? I don't understand. Didn't you not like sales? I'm like, yes, but also it was like better for me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, and like there's a million different examples, but like sales to sales, I don't even know what that means. I mean, there's so many different permutations of a sales career that it makes perfect sense to actually explore several permutations before you settle on what it is that you want to do.
100%, 100%. When it comes to yours, obviously you have your sales background, you have a lot of other things in your background. But when it comes to sales background specifically, a lot of things might have come naturally, and a lot of things you had to develop. When it comes to maybe one or two things you had to develop, what was the process of developing that in you?
Well, the first thing is I usually do better by leaning into my strengths
Mm.
before I try to improve my weaknesses. And so, as a young person, a lot of times you think that you have to fix everything at once, or you have a manager who tries to teach you everything at once, or they do it in the wrong order. So, a good example is a lot of companies will contact me and say, can you train our closers on how to close at a higher rate? Say, sure, I can do that. But then as we sort of dive under the covers, we realize that that's really the least of their issues. That's their close rate. It could be their origination. It can be their transitions. It could be their discovery. So I think for me, what worked out was realizing, okay, this is what I'm good at. So I'm going to get extra good at that. So I was really, really good at originating, meaning that I could get on the phone and cold call, like literally out of a phone book. And at one point, I could pretty much make a sale for like every 30 to 35 phone calls that I would make. And so I mastered the origination, figuring even if I don't become a great closer, as long as my pipeline is massive and it's being filled up every day, then the rest of it works itself out. And that's sort of how it worked. I didn't start out as a good closer. One reason is because I never knew what that looked like. I wasn't raised by salespeople, and in pharmaceutical sales, you really aren't closing. You're definitely more influencing and urging a doctor to write a prescription. It's not like they don't buy something from you. And so I wasn't a great closer. I'd watched, the typical movies that tell you what a closer looks like, and none of those movies are rooted in any form of sales reality. So what I did is just leaned into my strength that I could originate a pipeline very quickly, and then learned how to get better at closing. And but along the way, never lost sight of continuing to practice and perfect the things that I was naturally good at. And that's just an important thing for anybody in their career. Is it's wonderful to learn new things. You have to learn new things, but you should shore up what you are naturally great at, perfect that in your career, and then layer on the learnings on top of that. That's typically going to be the best foundation for long-term success.
I love that. I love that. So definitely built that foundation, right? You talk about how you have that foundation, but then you can layer on different things.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, there's many thousands of sales books out there, business books,
Mm-hmm.
and there's all different ways of succeeding in sales or in business or in operations. But if you take a 250 page, sales training book, it doesn't do you a lot of good if you don't have a foundation of certain things, the basics that you do extremely well. You're not really, there's no magic bullet, there's nothing you're going to read in a book that is going to bail you out from a lack of fundamentals, whether it's in sales or in business. And we see that on a personal level. We see that on a organizational level. Anytime an organization fails to master one specific part of their business, they typically will struggle to master any other part of their business. So you're much better off just leaning into what you do extremely well, branding yourself as the expert there, whether it's to your clients or your customers or to the industry. And then you can always add those additional things that add to your success. But you just cannot, you can never be really successful without mastering certain fundamentals.
100%, 100%. When it comes to books, obviously you said books are great, right? Because you're able to gain insight, but also a lot of people use books as like a crutch. What books have you found that helped you a lot?
I mean, there might be 2 or 3 sales books that I've ever read that helped me in any way, and I probably only read the first 15 pages of those books. Um, I mean, there just aren't a lot of books that could possibly fill up 250 pages of decent content.
Mm.
So there's certain books that I've read, like none really pop off the top of my head. There's one by Paul Arden that's I think it's called "It's Not How Good You Are, It's How Good You Want to Be." It's a very short book, but very actionable. Um, like a friend of mine, Richard Harris, who runs a sales training company, his recent book "Seller's Journey" is fantastic. But I get actually a lot more out of reading non-business books. So my career and my life has been enriched far more by learning about concepts in context than in just being told this is what you should do. Um, you might be reading like Team of Rivals, which is a book about Abraham Lincoln's cabinet. And if you read that and just really absorb the information, you'll have 20 examples of how he negotiated and how he communicated effectively with people. And so to me, I learn much better off of just reading like nonfiction or um, just well-written books in general,
Mm-hmm.
and then internalizing those things and then applying them sort of in a system in business.
I love that. I love that. And also, you're an author, right? So you wrote a book as well.
I write, right? Yeah, I write a lot. I've I've written tons. I don't have anything published in in a bookstore, but that's because honestly, I'm not sure it suits what I do. Everything I do is a little more fluid. So I've written 6, 7, 800 pages of sales and leadership content, and I've put it out online and whatnot. But to put it all in one book, that book would be good, but it would be out of date, a month after I published it. So I tend to usually just publish things online, and that also allows me to have a conversation with the readers because if they make a comment, I can respond. I can actually work through these concepts with my readers. So one day I'll publish something that actually goes in a bookstore, and I could probably next week if I just literally chose 20 random chapters. But it's not a huge goal for mine anymore. It used to be. I used to really wanted to be an in print published author, but I don't care about that too much anymore.
I see. Just to wrap it up, I know I was going to take that much of your time. I had a couple questions about developing confidence in your journey,
Sure.
well as the Ukraine trip.
Sure.
So first off, I guess we're talking about sales, we're talking about authorship, we're talking about skills in general. How did you develop confidence? Did it just come? What was your confidence process?
I think that's actually an important question because I was sort of born with a lot of confidence. Not that that was part of my personality, but I was born into a pretty good situation in life.
Mhm.
And so people always told me I was good at things, and I did have some skill in academia and in sports, and and so a lot of people just told me I was great. Well, the problem is when I got to about your age, the first time I got punched in the face by the real world, your confidence can get shaken pretty badly. And so I had to sort of rebuild my confidence based on the real world and not just people's, telling me I was great all the time.
Mhm.
But that, I'll tell you what builds confidence is that you just have to do things over and over and over again. And you have to, confidence is really just personal trust. And trust, between you and I is built by, if you come work for me, I'm going to build trust with you by doing lots of little things properly over a long period of time that has a good impact on your life. And if I make a mistake, owning up to it and fixing it. And it's sort of the same thing with personal confidence is you have to give yourself trust that you have skill, and then you have to practice those skills. And then you have to forgive yourself for mistakes and just continue to remind yourself that, you can't always be successful. There's always going to be strikeouts. There's always going to be failed sales calls. But you just have to layer trust in your own capabilities. Sort of a good example of this is I'll have people call me and right before they accept a big job offer, and they'll say I'm getting really nervous, and I'll just say, okay, so how long have you been interviewing? Well, we've had 8 meetings. Okay, and have you asked tons of questions? Yes. So you've studied it out in your mind all different ways? Yes. Okay. When was the last time you made a really bad decision that would make you think that this would be a bad decision? And sort of just walk them through and say, basically, assuming you did with this, exploring this opportunity as you have with everything else, there's no reason to think that you aren't making a great decision. Just remind yourself you've been here before. You've always made great decisions. When things don't go perfectly, you've always done very well at recovering from those things. So say yes and be confident. And that's just really how it works in a career is the idea that you won't have any failure is it's kind of silly. So you have to just commit, trust that you're willing to put in the hard work, trust that you've been able to ask the right questions and be real honest about about those answers. And um, that typically is what layers trust in yourself, and that trust comes out as confidence.
And do you follow your gut or do you follow your mind? Or just like a bit of both?
You know, I I typically am somebody who is going to follow the data first.
Mhm.
I mean, I don't think that. I mean, I'm always going to form a hypothesis, right? I'm
Yeah.
not just going to pull a bunch of data and just pretend that I can just look at ones and zeros and everything pops out at me. But I'll start with a hypothesis and then I'll dig into the data. I'll be real honest with myself. If the data doesn't show that my hypothesis is correct, then I won't do it. But if my hypothesis seems to be correct and the data don't uh, countermand that, but the data aren't perfectly clear, then I will sort of look at like the theory of most likely, which is based on my hypothesis, based on this data, based on what I know about the world around me, is it most likely that this is going to be a good decision? And if the answer is yes, then I'm gonna follow my gut, but I'm also gonna put in guardrails that test whether or not it's going like I think it was going to go. And then I'm humble, and if it isn't working out, humble enough to stop doing it, right, and switch course. But I think, I guess in summary, it'd be like, my gut produces a hypothesis. The data tell me what to do after that, and if it's not extremely clear, then I go back to just that gut feeling. But it's not really a gut. It's
Mhm.
a gut feeling is, like, data is more than just spreadsheets and numbers. Data is also the combination of all your life experiences and your ability to observe the world around you. So there's a lot of times that companies or people are paralyzed by a lack of perfect data. But I just remind them that the lack of perfect, empirical data is certainly augmented by hordes of other data from your own personal experiences and your observations about life. So you probably have more data than you actually think you do.
Diving into the whole Ukraine thing, I know you were out there in Europe on a sabbatical, right? Like,
Yep,
and then you started helping them out,
that's
right?
right. That's right. Yeah.
What were some of the, I don't know, craziest stories? What were some of the learnings from that experience?
I mean, crazy stories. I could probably go on for hours, but I think it was. I think we knew we were getting into something difficult, but could not have possibly imagined how difficult it was and the extent of the issue. And so there was a lot of surprise there, on a personal level. Just meeting people who had just suffered severe PTSD for the first time and learning how to navigate that, learning how to tend to people's needs when they're under intense, duress. Um, Learning about my own capabilities um, to take risks and to act on people's behalf, or to help people. Learning or relearning, or just how important my wife and son are to me, and their courage. And I mean, there's so many things you can learn from that experience. But it was one of the greatest experiences of my life. On site, it was several months, and then call it a year and a half of follow-up work, and then we still do some things to help out. But yeah, I wouldn't trade it for anything. It was really, really great, and I would do it again in a heartbeat.
Do you have any last notes to the audience? Any last comments before we end?
Nope. I mean, I've got lots of comments, but I mean, I could talk for hours. But no, like, those are good questions. It's been fun to answer them, and unless there's anything else, like, there's nothing I have to offer.
100%, 100%. We're going to dive into our final section then. And like I said
Okay.
before, it's our encyclopedia secret question,
Okay.
where the guest shares a secret or an insight from their life, and then I will review all the insights at the very end of the season.
Okay.
So what do you think your insight would be?
In what way? What do you mean by insight?
Just biggest takeaway. I know a lot of people we talked about like creating personal brands, so they gave it like their 2 cents about it or their secret about it. But maybe when it comes to, like, I don't know, sales, Ukraine, it's just life experience. Like,
So yeah, there's a lot of life lessons that I sort of preach to people who ask for advice, but there's one that I would maybe leave in this case. It's, um, you tend to be more successful in life when you act upon your environment and don't let the environment act upon you. So typically, taking action and taking control of a scenario produces better results, produces faster results, and also removes a lot of resentment that you can have in life from sitting back and waiting for the world to act upon you. So whether you're a brand that is trying to grow and capture market share, or you're a person who is attempting to get through a difficult time in your life, or navigate your career, navigate family, whatever it may be, I typically think that those who take action and don't wait for the world to act upon them typically have better outcomes. And even when things aren't perfect, they typically feel more at peace and more resolute with the lives that they've lived. So I would just encourage people to decide whether you are a product of the world, or whether you are causing the world to be a product of you. And it doesn't mean that you have to go win a world war. It doesn't mean you have to go and cure cancer. But if you can look in the mirror and say that you shape the world more than the world shapes you, then I think that's probably a pretty successful life.
100%, 100%. Thank you for hopping on the call. Thank you for hopping on the show.
You got it.
Comes to finding you and finding you on LinkedIn, is that the main place to find you?
Yeah, if you just look at Mark America Smith on LinkedIn, you'll find me.
100%, 100%. So if you want pure future content, if you want to see what he's up to, definitely check that out below. And thank you again for everything that you've done.
You got it. Talk to you later.
Talk to you. Bye.